Her eyes shone like stars, and yet the alien fox girl was left in darkness. She walked the metal ridge of the wreck with soft steps and quiet breath. Her tail moved slow behind her like a tired flag in night wind. The ship lay broken in a canyon. Of black stone and thin blue mist, a faint hum lived in the walls like the last song of a sleeping bird. Her name was Sira. She was small by the measure of her people, yet her spirit felt tall and sharp. Her ears were shaped like a crescent moon, and they tilted when any sound dared to rise. She looked to the sky where thin cold stars waited like distant fires. No signal came. No friend called her name. Days passed in silence that felt heavy as iron. Sira learned the map of the canyon by heart. She counted the steps from the torn hatch to the pool of pale water. She counted the breaths between the slow fades of the broken beacon. She patched what she could with wire and hope. When the beacon coughed a spark, she lifted her head, but the spark died and the canyon took back its hush long ago. She had trusted a promise a human ship would return and lift her to the light. She remembered the pilot with kind eyes and a rough voice. She remembered how the pilot said, "Hold fast, we will." Come then, war came to the lanes and the promise fell into smoke. So the girl with star-bright eyes stayed alone on a cold moon, and she learned to be quiet and steady and alive one morning. The mist grew thin, and the canyon showed a new face. A figure stood on the ridge above the wreck, a human in a pale suit with frost on the boots. A voice came over the air in a soft tone. The name was Claire. She spoke like someone who knew the value of a held breath. She said she had found a lost signal on an old chart. She said she came because leaving it behind felt wrong. Sira watched with care. Her ears were still. Her tail stopped. Her eyes held the strange human like two small moons. Claire climbed down the ridge by slow stages and careful steps. She carried a pack and a coil of bright lines. She did not rush or demand. She moved as if the canyon were a library, and silence was the first rule. When she reached the deck, she paused and lifted a hand in greeting. Sira let out the breath she had. Saved, she raised her own hand, and the space between them felt less sharp. They sat by the pool where the ceiling leaked thin light. Claire passed a fold of warm cloth and a tin of sweet berries. She used simple words that did not bite. Sira listened, and replied with the few human words she had learned. They were clumsy yet honest, and they worked like bridges across a narrow river. Claire said she was not from any fleet. With a loud name, she was a scout with a small ship and a stubborn heart. She said she could not promise a rescue in one jump, but she could promise to stay until a path opened. That night they worked on the beacon together. Sira knew the bones of the wreck better than any map. Claire knew how human relays sang to one another in old bands of light. They wove a new signal from pieces of the floor and the spine of a broken drone. They climbed the ridge and set a dish that looked like a flower of silver. They listened as the dish whispered to the stars. The whisper began to rise to a thin, clear call. Both of them held their breath again. Then the call steadied and became a thread of light across the dark days, rolled forward like stones down a slope. Claire taught Sira how to warm her hands with a small field. Sira taught Claire how to read the wind that moved through rock cracks. They repaired the airmaker with the help of a child's simple tool set. They harvested gray moss that lived in the cold and turned it into food. They slept in turns. They talked in turns. They watched the thread of light climb the sky each evening. Hope became a real thing and not a tale told to make the night feel kinder still. The old fear lived in Sira like a shadow. A promise had failed before she knew how sharp a silence can be when ships do not come, sometimes in the low hours. Her ears folded close and her tail drew tight. She looked at the doorway and waited for empty air to speak. Claire saw this and did not offer pretty lies. She offered work and steady presence. She offered plans that could bend when the wind changed. She offered a hand to hold when the ridge shook with thin quakes. In time, the shadow inside Sira grew smaller. One dawn, a pulse arrived that did not belong to their dish. A far voice moved through the thin air like a bright bird. Claire lifted the receiver and listened with her head bowed. The voice said a convoy would pass near in 3 days. One ship had room for 2 souls and a box of salvage. Sira stood still and her eyes widened. A warm breath moved across her face like sunrise. She said the word home in her own tongue. It sounded like a bell wrapped in cloth. They prepared for the climb to the high plain where a ship could touch down. They packed coils and filters and the tin of sweet berries they had saved. Claire wrapped Syra in layers of soft fiber. Syra adjusted the strap of the pack for the shape of her tail. They left the wreck and moved along the ridge path. The canyon pressed close on both sides, whined, sang in the cracks, and old dust drifted through the pale light. They climbed until the floor fell away, and the sky opened like a wide door on the second day. A storm of glitter ice rose from the far slope. It pressed hard against their suits, and the temperature fell. They took shelter in a cave of black glass. Claire built a small field wall that hummed like a warm hive. Syra curled close to the hum and let her ears rest in that hush. They spoke of small things, of the way moss glows at night, of the way human music lifts when a chorus joins. Claire shared a story of a river back on Earth. She spoke the name Lily. She said Lily was her sister and had a laugh like rain. She said Lily taught her that a promise is not a contract but a seed. If you feed it with work and kindness, it grows into a tree that does not fall in wind on the third day. They reached the high plain. The sky looked near and kind. A thin sun climbed and made a ribbon of light on the ice. They set the beacon on a tripod and lifted the dish toward the blue. The convoy replied with a tone like a bell. Syra pressed her hands together and closed her eyes. She let herself imagine the floor of a warm ship. She let herself imagine a room with soft light and a window, full of quiet stars. Time moved slow until a speck appeared at the edge of the sky. The speck grew into a ship with a pale hull and a gentle voice. It came down with a grace that made the ice whisper landing. Legs touched the plane and held the ramp, opened, and a breath of air rolled out warm and clean. A figure stepped forward. A woman with short hair and steady eyes. The name was Megan. She spoke a simple greeting and said she had orders to lift 2 passengers to safe harbor. Syra stood at the foot of the ramp and looked back at the canyon for a moment. The old darkness tried to pull her down. Memories of waiting and quiet pain rose like cold smoke. She looked at Claire. Claire nodded and gave that half smile that says, "Keep going, Syra," climbed the ramp, her ears tilted to the hum of the ship. Her tail lifted in a small arc. Her eyes shone again like stars. But now they were not alone inside the ship. A soft voice named Ava guided them to a cabin. Warm light wrapped the walls. The air tasted like clean rain. Megan checked their suits and offered water and a sweet bar. Claire thanked her and sat on a low bench with her hands folded. Syra touched the window and watched the plane shrink. The ship rose without a hard shake. The moon turned into a white coin set in velvet. The convoy gathered like a flock and pointed toward known lanes. Megan came back to the cabin with a small pouch. She said there was room on a station near the Blue Star where rescue lines met. She said there were people there who loved to welcome the strange and the brave. She said a grant could help Syra study and build what she dreamed. Claire added that human hearts grow larger when they keep a promise. Syra listened, and the air felt new and generous. She spoke of a school she wanted to start someday, a place where beings from many skies could learn to fix what was broken. Not only ships, also fears, also old silences. The convoy slid into a lane of light, and the moon fell behind like a memory. Syra rested her head against the window and let sleep come. Claire kept watch with calm eyes and a quiet smile. Megan and Ava worked with easy grace in the small bridge. They were not heroes from grand banners. They were people who chose to answer a thin call. They were people who turned a lonely signal into a path. At last the station appeared as a ring of gardens and warm glow. The ship curved in and touched the dock with soft hands. Doors opened and air with a smell like fresh leaf and clean bread moved around them. Lily was there in a frame on a wall near the reception desk, a photo of a woman with a rain-bright laugh. Claire touched the frame with her fingers and closed her eyes for a moment. Then she turned to Syra and nodded. Toward the hall of classrooms, Syra stepped forward with her ears high and her tail light and free under the station light. She did not feel the old darkness pressing. She felt the warm weight of a promise kept. She felt the first day of a work that would last. Her eyes still shone like stars. But now they lit the path ahead for others who might be lost, and the human choice to return to listen to, hold steady became a small sun in a wide and once silent sky.